Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zero Project Conference 2026. And yet again, we are at a very interesting Fireside Chat that will be talking about AI and neurodiversity. I'm joined online with Margarita Lane, the labor market economist at OECD, working primarily on AI. Hello, Margarita. It's great to have you online. It's a pity that you couldn't join us here because we have so many interesting sessions on neurodiverse talents. But maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit more, and then we will jump in right into the report that we will discuss in this Fireside Chat.
Yes, indeed. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, especially because I think a lot of the experts who contributed to the report that I'll be talking about today are actually in the room or present at the conference. So it would have been nice to see people in person. But so I'll just say a few words maybe about the OECD before we start, because we're an intergovernmental organization with 38 member countries. And we work on essentially any topic that a government would work on. So topics as diverse as the environment, tax, employment. And what links all of these topics together is that we are trying to build better policies for better lives. And this report that we launched today on AI to support neurodivergent learners in vocational education and training is just one part of that.
Can you tell me a little bit about the motivation behind that report? Because AI, neurodiverse communities, they often go together, but I'm not sure that if they really go together with VET that often. So maybe you can share a little bit on that.
Yeah, so in terms of the motivation behind the report, I think it would be helpful to start with some statistics, some employment statistics. So did you know that adults with ADHD could be 10 to 25 percentage points less likely to be employed than adults without ADHD?
Unfortunately, yes, but it's not a good statistic, right?
Well, I'm talking to a very educated audience, I suppose. And it really shocked me to learn that, for example, between 50 to 75% of adults with autism spectrum disorders are unemployed. Also, I mean, the gaps occur even before neurodivergent people enter the workplace. We know that students with learning disabilities are twice as likely to leave school before completion compared to students without learning disabilities. And I think what all of this points to is that there's a lot of talent being underused and undervalued. There are a lot of neurodivergent people who would love to be learning, contributing, working, but are facing education systems and workplaces that are not built for neurodiversity. And so this report published by the OECD today, and it's available on the OECD website right now, it looks at the potential for AI and other advanced technologies to support neurodivergent learners in education, and specifically in the part of education that's called vocational education and training. And I'll maybe give a definition of that, because it looks, vocational education and training, it looks a little bit different in different countries. And essentially, I'm talking about training that aims to equip students with practical job-specific skills, and where at least some of the learning takes place in a real work environment. So depending on the country, vocational education and training, I might just say VET from now on, the acronym. So VET can be delivered at secondary level or tertiary level. And in many countries, apprenticeships would be probably the best known form of VET. And I think it's this focus on VET and on practical job-specific skills and workplace learning that's the really novel aspect of this report. Because, I mean, it's quite obvious how a student might use ChatGPT to, deconstruct a Shakespeare play for their English literature class, but it's perhaps less obvious how AI and other technologies can be used for learning that's actually taking place in a real work environment. So, for example, in a hospital ward, in a kitchen, in a beauty salon, or at a construction site, for example. So as part of our study, we interviewed over 50 stakeholders including teachers, employers, disability advocates, technologists, and gathered lots of interesting examples of how AI is being used to support neurodivergent learners in vocational education and training, and also how it can make vocational education and training ultimately more inclusive and more innovative.
So, basing on the research that you made for the report, do you think that the support that AI can give persons that are on the autism spectrum or have ADHD, is it really fully realized to the full potential of the AI, or are we still having some gaps, some things that we need to explore a little bit more?
Yeah, let me talk about I'll present the positive angle first, the potential, and then maybe I'll talk about where things are falling short. So, I mean, some of the most exciting applications that we talk about in the report are, related to virtual reality. And if I mention virtual reality, we're probably first thinking of video games, but actually there are really, really practical applications in vocational education and training. And the reason for this is that, once we move from the real environment to a virtual environment, we're opening up all this possibility to actually adapt the environment and to accommodate individual needs in a way that, real environments can't be adapted. So, I mean, maybe one good example of this is a driving simulator where you would be able to blur out distracting or unnecessary information for a learner experiencing overstimulation or a person who has difficulty focusing. And then as the person learns, as they learn to drive, you can gradually increase the complexity of the environment. And that's something that's not possible in the real world, but virtual reality opens up that possibility. The other advantage of virtual reality, which I think is really interesting, is that it allows for a kind of safe fail. Essentially, the idea that you can practice, you can make mistakes, but there are no negative repercussions. And the reason that this is so important is because many neurodivergent learners enter vocational education and training with quite low confidence and with high anxiety due to prior bad experiences in education systems that weren't built for them. So it's not just the physical safety that's important. So I mean, if you make a mistake, you're not injured, but it's actually also the psychological safety, the ability to build safety and build confidence, or build a sense of safety and build confidence. So one example of this is that there's a special needs vocational education and training college in Finland where students can use smart glasses to actually visit a work site virtually, and they can rehearse task sequences also using the glasses. And this allows them to build confidence before they then visit the workplace in real life. And then one other type of, this is moving away now from virtual reality, but we also talk about tools to support planning and time management. These are important skills for any learner to develop as they transition to work, but they could be challenging for learners with memory difficulties, or perhaps for learners who can become overwhelmed with stress. So interviewees told us about digital support systems such as Assistive and Brain in Hand, which provide step-by-step instructions to enable learners to carry out sequential tasks or to help manage stressful situations, like what if you've missed your bus on the way to your work placement. And I mean, in terms of talking about the potential that's maybe not there quite yet, some interviews even talked about the idea of like linking digital support systems to wearables that would detect, indicators of stress, for example, so that support could be given without the person even needing to actively request it. And a last one is that we also in the report talk about note-taking tools and speech-to-text tools more generally. These are tools that obviously could be used in a classroom or in a workplace setting. These tools are not new, but what's worth mentioning here is just how accurate and fluid these tools have become. due to these recent improvements in large language models, and also due to improvements in cloud computing as well, which allows devices to process information more efficiently. And I think these devices are useful to point out because, or the ability to use mobile devices is important to point out because they can be used in a variety of work and learning settings. I suppose I'll just maybe point out one area where maybe there's the potential is not being fully realized, and that is that there is often a disconnect between the amazing advanced technologies available and how that actually connects to the diversity of work environments that vocational education and training is often training people for. So I mentioned before, this could be a hospital ward or a kitchen or a construction site. These are work environments where people are not necessarily working at a desk, they're often on their feet. The work environments are often noisy and unpredictable. And so it's not, there are some practical challenges associated with bringing new technologies into these workplaces. And certainly it's been slow, the application of technology in these types of work environments and in vocational education and training has been slower than it has been in office environments or in academic learning, for example. And in the report, we talk about how part of the challenge is technical. It has to do with all of this data, contextual data, all this data you need to collect, showing people doing real tasks to build realistic environments for virtual reality, for example. And then part of the challenge is probably also a lack of imagination, that the people developing these technologies, potentially also the people providing access to grants to assistive technologies, are often working in desk-based jobs, and it can sometimes be challenging to think about the jobs that are not desk-based if you're in that type of work.
I think one of the points that we always bring into attention when talking about the AI is also the risks. We at Zero Project take it very, very seriously, and even within the Equitable AI Alliance that we are running together with Seneca Trust, we are both addressing the need of having a very equitable and very fair use of AI, but also to acknowledge the risks that many persons with disabilities are facing. Do you have any such risks also mentioned in your report?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned equitable and fair, and I think that's a great place to start. I mean, I suppose the first risk, and I've been able to join a couple of the sessions today and yesterday, and so I know that this is a theme running through a lot of your sessions, but affordability is a significant barrier, and that can drive further inequalities. Other risks, the risk, I mean, when our interviewees, I would say the most common risk that they raised were related to data privacy and to the risk of discrimination. And so, I mean, there's already concern about how AI in the workplace could lead to greater monitoring and surveillance. And I mentioned earlier the possibility of having AI-related wearables or augmented reality, for example. These could be really useful, but for a neurodivergent learner or worker. But they could lead to a situation where a neurodivergent worker is subject to a much greater degree of surveillance than their neurotypical colleague. And that could actually create then disparities in how performance is actually being evaluated. A lot of interviewees also expressed concern about the use of AI in recruitment tools as well, and for obvious reasons. I mean, that's a very clear harm that could result from bias in the system.
And unfortunately, I will need to cut you up because we only have 20 seconds left. So a very quick call to action from you, and we will end this session.
No problem. I think that, I mean, really what governments can do is they can encourage developers to build accessible and inclusive tech. They can design with neurodivergent learners in mind and also involved, and they can include neurodivergent learners, also teachers in testing, and they can make sure that developers of these tools are trained on accessibility and bias, and also that neurodivergent learners are represented among those developers as well. So thank you very much, Margarzada.
Thank you as well.